Often early in our career, we look at teeth that we've restored ourselves or someone else has restored, or even we get a case from the lab and we go, it doesn't look right, but we may not be sure why. So today I'm going to go through some cases and show some details of what makes teeth look great, what makes them not look great, and it's all in the shape of the pink, the black, and the white part of the smile. Shapes of teeth. Canines are nearly always wrong. The maximum point of curvature on a canine is in the gingival third, and you can see on this tooth, it's in the incisal third. It just makes it look like a fake canine. And the emergence profile shouldn't be aggressive. Usually emergence profiles and convexity in the wrong place are because the dentist didn't prep the teeth enough and didn't prep enough in the incisal third. So look at that, the emergence profile on this tooth is heading towards the shoulders, it should be heading towards the hips. If we tuck that canine in, put the emergence profile in the right place, look at that, suddenly it looks like a canine instead of a fake tooth. If we look at the other side, emergence profile is better on this side and the convexity is in the gingival third. That's where convexity should be on a canine. It's nearly always down further. Let's look at gingival heights. In general, we want the central incisors and the canines at least to be the same height. Now, not every case is like this, okay? These are just guidelines, but these guidelines help us see what's wrong with a smile. So in this case, the gingival heights, let's draw lines between them. You can see they're all over the place. Generally we want the canines at least the same height as the centrals and usually higher. Usually the canines and the laterals are very similar to the same height, and then the canine is higher, and the height of the canine above the central is what makes a lateral look a little bit shorter. So this is how we build our framework. We look at our curvature of our canines. Now let's look at our gingival heights. Once again, this canine looks funky because it has no emergence profile at all, but the emergence profile should be about there. So we should have some emergence and then bring it in. You can see that that distal lobe on the incisal edge is what basically ruins the effect. Otherwise it would look pretty good. Once again, this is how the tooth is. Maximum point of curvature down in the incisal third. It should be in the gingival third. And then if we have a nice, elegant emergence profile, suddenly a canine appears. That's where the maximum point of curvature should be. Now let's have a look at our gingival heights and at our long axis of our teeth. Maximum height of the gingiva should probably be something like that. You can see we draw a line between the canines and then do a straight line for these anterior teeth. It should be more or less like this, coming down to the lateral, straight across to the central, and so on. So if we were just to lift the gingiva up to this position, suddenly we would have a huge improvement, and you can see that the teeth are too short, so that's why they're too short. Let's now look at long axis of teeth. Long axis of the tooth is formed by the lowest point of the tooth and the highest point of the tooth. So this is the lowest point of the tooth. Now we're going to go to the height of the gingiva. And the long axis of the tooth can be affected by several things. It can be affected by the position of the lowest part of the tooth, but quite commonly it's affected by the height of the gingiva. Okay. We can see our smile curve is a little bit random in this particular example. It's not too bad, it's a little bit random and mostly affected by just a few teeth being slightly short. In general, the maximum height of gingiva should be slightly distal to the midline. So if I draw a long axis on these teeth, you're going to see that they're all a little bit random. So this lateral incisor is kicked out. It's pretty common with lateral incisors. That canine is really aimed in. This lateral is out again. And sometimes it's good to have lateral incisors that are asymmetrical, but I don't think they were done like that in this case. I think it just happened. Looking at the lip and looking at the smile curve helps us assess if the teeth are too short incisally or whether they're too short gingivally. Let's have a look again at long axis of teeth. So if you draw the height of the gingiva on this teeth and you draw the lowest point on the lateral incisors, you're going to see these teeth angle out towards the hips. So let's draw in some long axis that's more symmetrical. You can see I can never get past the canine maximum point of curvature. So if we draw some long axis as they probably should be, you're going to see that they don't go through the long axis of the tooth currently. So in most of these cases, at least the height of contour is distal, but you can see that the longest part of the tooth, particularly these lateral incisors, is generally a little bit distal. Now, we don't have to have every patient looking like this, but in general, it's going to look more pleasing if every long axis points towards the belly button. Now, let's move on to embrasures. The embrasures on this case are all over the place. The embrasure should be definitely wider on the canines and laterals than it should be on the centrals, but you can see that it's not symmetrical and it's a little bit random. In general, the distal of the central or the lateral should match the mesial of the tooth next door. So the mesial of the lateral incisor should match the distal of the central incisor. And that will give you a more even embrasure. So that's why these embrasures are not even. Once again, these embrasures are crazy. Look at this. Super wide. That's why it looks like a monotooth, because the embrasure is too wide between the central and the lateral. And you can't make it deep enough without making the whole tooth funky. So to get a nice deep embrasure so that the teeth look separated and they really pop out, you need to have it quite narrow between the central incisors, medium between the central and the lateral, and really wide between the canine. Oh, look at these maximum points of curvature on that left canine. Dreadful. Now let's look at gingival height. So these teeth look short, but they're not short because of the incisal edge, they're short because of the gingiva. So we can start to see all these centrals and laterals need to come up. That canine on the left side needs to come up like crazy. Okay, these are things that really bother the eye, so let's start to put it together. Let's look at where the height of the teeth should be. So that lateral incisor, I've made it exactly the same height at the gingiva as the central. But I've made it a little bit shorter on the incisal edge because it's usually a shorter tooth. Get a nice smile curve. The smile curve I've only guessed because I can't see the eyes. It could be quite uneven and my drawing's not that good. Now we can put in a proper long axis, tilted slightly towards the belly button. Okay, so what happens with teeth is that you don't carve something trying to make it look like a tooth. You just follow the rules of design of teeth. And if you follow those rules, when you finish, there you have a tooth. But often if you actually try and just start cutting it to look like a tooth without following rules, then you end up with a tooth that looks really blobby and artificial. So now I'm getting my long axis in. I've got my smile curve, which determines the incisal edge position. I've worked out my gingival points. Let's look at the incisal edge embrasure. So narrow it the front, slightly wider between the lateral and the central, and even wider between the lateral and the canine. So you can see now it's just joined the dots. I've put the dots and things in position. See, the embrasure just forms that nice curve on the edge of the tooth, and voila, there you go, the tooth pops out. And the same here, we start where it should be on the gingiva, got more rounded mesial of the lateral because it's a bigger embrasure, and then voila, a tooth pops out. So this is how I design teeth. I just follows a series of very simple rules. And if you follow those rules, notice how much better that canine looks. We've got to have that emergence, maximum point of curvature in the gingival third, and that's suddenly how we assess. The last thing we're going to add in is line angles. Line angles go up really high on central incisors. They go up less high on lateral incisors. You can see this, and even less on the canine. So let's just look at the details of all of these things together. And I want you to remember that a tooth is just a box with round corners. Even when I do it in the mouth, I first form a box. And by that I mean I get a big disc and I flatten the incisal edge, and when I flatten that incisal edge, I essentially create one edge of the box. So we can see our boxes, we're getting proportions because of lateral incisors versus canines. Now you can vary these things around for different patients, so sometimes you're going to make the canines shorter and more delicate, and sometimes you're going to make them bigger and more aggressive because we don't want every single patient to look the same. But in general, these are the rules. So we have some boxes. Maximum gingival height slightly distal of the midline, and then this is going to give us the long axis of the teeth that points towards the belly button. Now we want incisal embrasures that are narrow between the front teeth, wider between the lateral incisors, wider still between the lateral and the canine. And they should be pretty symmetrical. Doesn't have to be, but in general, pretty symmetrical. Okay, now we just join the dots. So if we curve from that maximum point of curvature that's slightly distal, we have good long axis, and obviously you can see I'm going to go crazy if my canines don't have their maximum convexity in the gingival third. Okay, now it's just paint by numbers. Follow the rules and out pops a tooth. So you can see I don't even have to draw the mesial part of the incisal edge because it's just formed by that embrasure that I've already drawn. So now we've got a framework to build the silhouette of the tooth. Once the silhouette of the tooth is correct within its box, now we need to turn it into actual teeth, and that's the line angles. The line angles are the last piece of the puzzle, and they turn silhouettes into three-dimensional teeth. And it's usually the line angles that let you down at the end, so if you get everything else right, it still looks fake until you do this last bit and then it pops. So the line angles go up really high on the central incisors. This is because the central incisor is more parallel-sided, I guess. Notice also that the line angle goes right up past the gingiva, so that face of the tooth should transition all the way to the gingiva, not have like a mini tooth within a tooth appearance. Everything outside of the line angle should be curved in almost to the contact. Don't cut the contact out, obviously you'll get a food pack, but curved almost to the contact. That's what makes the teeth separate. And if you don't separate the teeth, then it looks fake. So that's what makes the teeth pop as if they're all separate teeth, is the line angles. And that's the framework of how you make teeth. Thanks for watching. I hope that really helped you look at the shape of teeth with a little bit more clarity.